What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and the question we're going to answer in this video is, well, we're going to cover the origins and powers of Lorna Dane of Polaris, but one of the side answers, or one of the byproducts of this video is going to be an answer to the question, is Lorna Dane the daughter of Magneto? Because I feel like that's the question everybody wants to know. Is it true in the comics? So, I mean, I've been watching Gifted. I'm on like episode 1. The show's really good so far. It's kind of weird. I feel like Lauren and Andy, like the Von Strucker kids, I feel like they're stand-ins for Andrea and Andreas Von Strucker, who were basically the super twins from DC. Like, they had to hold hands and they could fly and shoot energy beams. They were like Chris Claremont creations back in like Uncanny X-Men 200 or something like that. I don't know if they are. Maybe they'll introduce the actual Von Strucker twins. I don't know. I don't know why you would introduce the Von Strucker twins. But I don't know. I mean, it is interesting. It is kind of intriguing. So with regards to Polaris, her whole story about her being the daughter of Magneto is weird. It's one of those crazy scenarios. So originally, back when she was introduced in X-Men number 50 by Arnold Drake, she appeared in like 3 stories, or at least it was a 3-part story. And it basically teased the idea that she was a daughter of Magneto. There was this guy named Mesmero who was kind of a weird, hokey villain for back then. And his idea was to gather all the mutants together and find this kind of mutant messiah who would embody all the traits of Magneto and would lead them to, you know, conquer the world and all that kind of good stuff. And Polaris was the person that he settled on. And so the whole idea here was that Mesmero made the statement that Polaris is the daughter of Magneto. The problem with this was that the X-Men weren't really that popular back then. And so there wasn't really a whole lot of interest in the team. Hence the reason why the publication was more or less just kind of shuffled, or at least it was scuttled in like, you know, issue number 65. And then it was reprints for 27 issues or something like that going into the relaunch with Giant Size X-Men number 1. That's the first time we ever got that indication. Now, eventually Magneto showed up in that story. I think it was issue number 52. And then we found out that version of Magneto was a robot. And so the whole idea was like, okay, that's kind of weird. Like, you know, do we get an actual explanation for this? Well, eventually the X-Men line of comics were relaunched with Giant Size X-Men number 1. The title was renamed to Uncanny X-Men, and it's more or less been that way ever since. But the whole idea is that the character of Lorna Dane being the daughter of Magneto was basically kind of teased at and hinted to over the course of something like 40 years. We were never given a definitive answer. Now, the closest that we ever got, or at least up until the definitive origin, came with, X-Men, it was in the mid-90s, I think it was. Anyway, it was in the aftermath of Age of Apocalypse, which was basically an alternate reality where Apocalypse had managed to conquer the world and, you know, or conquer North America and set his sights on the world, and that was really about it. In the aftermath of that story, various characters from that alternate reality managed to escape its destruction, which included like Nate Gray, X-Man, as well as Dark Beast, who was an evil version of Hank McCoy. He was an evil version of Beast. And this dark version of Beast had basically analyzed the genes of Lorna Dane and compared it to Magneto and said, she's not the daughter of Magneto. So then we had our answer. So we were like, okay, cool. She's not the actual daughter of Magneto. Fast forward up until X-Men, I'm sorry, I think it's, yeah, X-Men issue number, maybe it's Uncanny X-Men, issue number 431, I think it is, by Chuck Austin. And then we were told, yes, Lorna Dane is the daughter of Magneto. So we're like, okay, is she the daughter or is she not the daughter? So we got conflicting answers over the course of Marvel's publication history. Now, the kind of confusion and everything was sort of there, but this was basically reconciled back in 2012 with Factor 243. But basically it was a story that was written by Peter David. And the whole idea behind this was that it involved a mishmash of different characters like Longshot and Monet St. Croix, who had psychic powers and so on and so forth. But Longshot's ability, or at least his modified abilities, the new kind of powers that he had, was that he could touch an object and basically kind of pick up psychic residue on it. And what had happened was Lorna Dane had shown him a picture that she kept for herself where she had basically said, you know, look, this is a picture that my parents had, you know, back when I was younger and so on and so forth. And, you know, I've held on to it ever since. Longshot touched it and got this psychic feedback. And so the whole idea was the story that Lorna Dane had pitched was that she didn't really know what happened to her parents. All she'd known is that her parents were pilots and the plane exploded and the metal was basically magnetized. And the indication was that Magneto killed her parents. And so that was kind of the idea, you know, going forward for a little while. Well, in this story, what we end up finding out is that by virtue of Monet St. Croix basically linking the minds of Lorna Dane and Longshot together, that yes, Magneto was present. But the reason why was because of the fact that Lorna Dane's biological mom had an affair with Magneto. And so ultimately Lorna Dane is the daughter of Magneto. The problem with this was that Lorna Dane killed her parents. I mean, that's not funny. We shouldn't laugh at that. But she had basically killed her parents. The whole idea was that she was a baby at the time while her parents were flying plane. I think they were going to Vegas or something like that. And they started arguing with one another over the fact that Lorna Dane's biological mom had cheated on her biological dad. And so the result of this is that while they were bickering and arguing with each other, Lorna Dane woke up as a little baby and started crying, panicking, and freaked out and screamed, "Stop fighting." And then her magnetic powers manifested and she basically destroyed the plane. The result was that when she crash landed, we ended up having Magneto and Mastermind who responded. Now, Mastermind, of course, is a character that we haven't really talked about too much. Ironically enough, is the first video I ever did on my channel. And so we haven't really talked about him a whole lot since then. Mastermind is a mutant. His name is Jason Wingard. He's a mutant that has the ability to cast illusions. He can basically trick people into seeing things that aren't there. Essentially, he controls the 5 senses. So if you see it, smell it, touch it, taste it, hear it, or feel it, he can manipulate those 5 things and make you believe that whatever it is that he is creating an illusion of is real. So like in the case of the Phoenix Saga, maybe it was the Dark Phoenix Saga. I think it led into the Dark Phoenix Saga when the Hellfire Club took Jean Grey when she was the Phoenix Force. But regardless, Jason Wingard used his powers, which were amplified by Emma Frost, and essentially tricked Jean Grey into believing that she was on like this old pirate ship or something along those lines. She was, this old colonial chick or something, which I guess she dug, but she could smell the salt on the air. She could feel the water like hitting her face. She thought it was 100% real, which is crazy. But what ended up happening is Magneto instructed Mastermind, who at the time was part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, to create an illusion in the mind of Lorna Dane, basically tricking her into believing the origin she previously had was the real one. But the fact remains, to answer the question, yes, Lorna Dane is the biological daughter of Magneto. That was confirmed back in 2012, and it's been that way ever since. With regards to Lorna Dane versus Magneto, that's the question that a lot of people want to know. How powerful is Lorna Dane in comparison to Magneto? Okay, what we have to do is we have to understand the difference between powers and like the ability to use powers. Just because characters have the same power doesn't mean they're equal in power. Like Magneto can control magnetism and Lorna Dane can control magnetism. The difference is that Magneto has a lot more experience with his magnetic powers than Lorna Dane does. Now, there was a point where she had mental blocks in place, and really that was kind of like a story that came in later on where they kind of, introduced that idea. By and large, she's never been equal to Magneto in power. She's been exceedingly close, but she's never really been equal to Magneto in power. There was a story that was published in 2001 by Grant Morrison called E is for Extinction. And E is for Extinction dealt with the idea of Cassandra Nova, it's this weird story where she was basically a twin of Charles Xavier that died in the womb, like Charles Xavier killed her or something along those lines. It's really crazy and it's really strange, but essentially Cassandra Nova had basically had these wild sentinels rebuilt and then sent them to the mutant island of Genosha and then wiped out 16 million mutants. And Lorna Dane was there. She was training with Magneto at the time for like 6 months or something like that. And she just suffered like this catastrophic mental breakdown that basically drove her insane. But a byproduct of being driven insane is that these mental blocks that kept her powers in check were removed. And her power was just kind of pushed to the extreme of what it was capable of at the time. It doesn't mean it was pushed to the absolute extreme, the greatest she'll ever achieve. It just means it was pushed to the extreme relative to where she was at that point in time. She wasn't on par with Magneto. Magneto is more of like an Omega level threat, even though it's never been confirmed, but we all know it's true. She's close, but she just doesn't have the nuances. She doesn't have the ability to manipulate things on the same scale he does. She can manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum to a degree. She's not one of those who can like traverse Earth, go to a different planet, and be just as much of a threat there as she is, with regards to, the planet Earth. I mean, maybe she was during the Starjammers arc, when she joined the Starjammers team during like War of Kings. During War of Kings, maybe she was, because I remember she fought Vulcan, and I think maybe she was a trans level threat or a transplanet threat. I don't know. In any event, the long and short of it is that Marvel's never given us a story where it's been like Magneto versus Polaris. And so they've never definitively stated who is more powerful. At the end of the day, it really just kind of boils down to who's a fan of which. Magneto fans will say, well, of course Magneto's more powerful than she is. And Polaris fans will say, no, Polaris is just as powerful as Magneto. There's no definitive answer there. And so it comes down to power scaling where people just kind of make stuff up. And so again, that's kind of the weird thing there and the kind of strange scenario. We don't have an answer yet. Hopefully we get one sometime soon. I mean, the closest that we ever get to an answer, I think, is during the collapse of the multiverse in Secret Wars, and there is an X-Men tie-in. I want to say it's one of the Last Days tie-ins, but it's a tie-in to the events of Secret Wars when the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe are about to crash into each other and destroy what's left of the universes, and Magneto travels to the Ultimate Universe and unleashes holy hell on like the Sentinels who are there, and Polaris is just like, my God, I can't believe he's that powerful. That's the closest closest that we get. So I guess using that, you can kind of infer that he's more powerful than she is. But at the end of the day, all we're really doing is just guessing. It's haphazard guessing and speculation, and that's all it ever really comes down to. So again, no definitive answers there, but in terms of her being the daughter of Magneto, that is true. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.